Hello everyone, I am Grandmaster Renato Quintiliano and this is our series Study the Classics. Today we are going to see a game by Mihail, the magician of Riga, a brilliant attacking player, a genius for sure, and I decided to show, if I'm not wrong, this was the first game I saw, if my memory is not betraying me. This is the first game I saw by Tao, and I was a child. I had 10 or 11 years back then, and I still remember being amazed by this game, by Tao's moves, and still nowadays when I am already a stronger player, a grandmaster, I still like very much this game, the way, the creative way as Tao played, and I hope you enjoy it as well. It's not the most famous game by Tao, so I hope it comes as a surprise for you. So this game was played in the World Championship for Students in 1958, so that's why it's not so famous, but okay. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7. We have the King's Indian defense after e4, d6, and here Bobotsov played f3. A very solid position, very solid line, the Simish. It seems like a really able choice against an aggressive player like Tao. So castles, and here he played knight g2, e2. According to Modern Theory, bishop e3 and bishop g5 are more popular options, keeping White's next moves more flexible. So knight g2 kind of limits White's next development moves. So c5 was played here. Black is looking for Benoni structures. He wants to provoke d5 to start playing for the dark squares. This is probably better than e5, because now bishop g5 seems pleasant for White, continuing with queen d2, for example. So, okay, c5, and here bishop e3. Of course, White could play d5. This is the most critical. And after e6, the game could continue with knight g3, e takes c5, e takes d5, c takes d5, then a4, a6, a4. This is how most of the games continuing nowadays. It's the modern way of facing this line for White, and it leads to complex positions with chances for both sides. We have a Benoni type structure here. Black can look for active play on the dark squares and try to break Farag with f5. So also the advanced b5 can be prepared. So it's a very dynamic position, totally in Tao style. So that's why White plays bishop e3 here, trying to keep the tension and the waiting for c takes d4, knight takes d4, aiming for a more axis structure. But of course Tao doesn't want to play a calm position like that. Here he continues with knight b7, which nowadays it can be considered doubles, this move, but only because we have access to Modern Theory and the engines and the stuff like that. Of course, when more than 50 years ago, it was totally playable. And also, I understand from a practical point of view why Tao played this move. Because in case of knight c6, which is the main line, White has the option. Of course, d5 is still critical and possible. It's totally playable, but White can also play d takes c5. D takes, queen takes d8, rook takes d8, and bishop takes c5. Actually, this is not really a pawn up for White, because Black has a lot of compensation, both from an objective and practical point of view, as many tournament games have proven. But of course, this position is not the preferred kind of position for Mikhail Tal. Queens are already off board, and he would be able, of course, to prove the compensation, Black's compensation for the pawn. But we obviously understand that Tao was looking for something more tense and a bit funnier as well than this position. So instead of knight c6 allowing the exchange of queens, he plays knight b7. And here, queen d2, was how white played, a6. And now white play, I mean, a6 is already a move that kind of shows some of black's intentions. I mean, here white could have been more careful and also wiser and do not play how he played in the game, because he played castles here, long castles. I mean, in normal circumstances, I think this move would be, I would consider it just a careless decision. But when you are playing against Mihail Tal, it can be surely considered as a mistake, because it's obvious that black is going to attack this king at some point. And if your opponent is Tal, it's obvious that he's going to attack you with all his forces to look for a mating attack. Because on c1, the king is always... it can be always vulnerable to break frogs like b5, for example, and the other ideas. So this was really a very risky decision by white, and probably a mistake as well. Instead, he could have played d5 here, but maybe Tao was already prepared after his last move to play b5 and go for some Banco style position with active play on the queen side and pressure on the b and a files, sacrificing a pawn, and also on the long diagonal. Rook d1 was a safe option, just increasing white's control in the center and waiting for some definition by black, maybe preparing, I don't know, knight c1, knight b3, bishop e2, something like that. But the best continuation here according to recent games and Modern Fury and also my engine, is d takes c5. Then if knight takes c5, white plays knight d4, and here white has a pleasant position. We have this Marrakech structure, which gives some space advantage for white. He could play bishop e2, castles, and he would have a nice position. And in case of d takes c5, now rook d1 is a good idea, threatening bishop c5, and when queen c7, knight f4, because this knight is coming to d5, or simply vacating the e2 square for the bishop. Here white has an advantage, and he can mobilize his pieces very easily with a nice position and better prospects. But instead of the long castles, let's see, Tao plays immediately queen a5. I think he should have analyzed the b5, which seems also very tempting, but in this case the complications work in white's favor after d takes c5. Because if, for example, b takes c4, now c takes d6, this is simply good for white, simply better for white. And in case of b4, there is knight d5. So d takes c5, knight takes f6, bishop takes, because the knight cannot go to f6, and now knight f4 instead of bishop takes c5, because after queen c7, there is some compensation for black, but knight f4 is very good, threatening knight d5 again, and if e6, knight d3. So here white has strong play in the center and also ideas in center, and also strong idea, promising ideas on the king side. So this is why white's position looks better here. But instead, because of that, I think Tao didn't play b5. He plays queen a5. Then here, king b1 was white's move. I think here Bobotsov was still thinking his play was natural and also clever. Maybe he was trying to provoke Tao's moves, Tao's aggressive moves, because he was counting on a tactical resource after b5, which was knight d5. So this move is bad, but I'm able to understand. I can understand why Bobotsov went for this, because he probably thought, okay, I'm provoking here to play queen a5. Then I continue with king b1, preparing knight d5. He cannot play b5 and will have to spend one tempo. So yeah, after he spend one tempo, I can play, I don't know, white can play knight c1, knight b3, for example, attacking the queen and reinforcing the queen side. But instead, Tao plays b5 because he had planned an amazing reply. So after knight d5, you can pause the video and try to find how Tao reacted to this trap by white. Well, of course, white was only expecting something like, I don't know, queen d8, when he would have the possibility of knight takes f6, and if knight takes, I don't know, maybe d takes c5 because of the pin on the d file, and this looks good for white. But instead, Tau Tau surely anticipated this knight d5, and he had an equally strong, a very stronger reply ready here for this move. He plays knight takes d5, just giving the queen. Of course, white's not going to play c takes d5 because that would be a moral defeat. It's a bad move also, but it would be a moral defeat if you mix all these moves to attack the queen and doesn't takes the queen. So he plays queen takes a5. But now knight takes e3. So Tau sacrifices his queen for 2 pieces. He's also about to win at least 1 pawn here because he's attacking the rook and the pawn. But the most important thing about this game, and also about attacking players in general, is that they are able to ignore materialistic faults, and they are capable to consider dynamic factors like PC activity, coordination, and the vulnerability of the exposed king, and they manage to combine all these things in variations and finding tactical ideas, and they are really good at taking the momentum to play for the initiative and exploit the temporary activity of his pieces when they are better placed than the opponent's pieces. So this is the point here. Tau sacrifices his queen for two pieces, but we will see that his pieces are coming into play much easier and much faster than white's pieces. And that's why he's confident that his 2 pieces will be more than enough compensation for the enemy queen. And let's see how the game goes. Rook c1 is, to me, it's a very natural move. But defending is never an easy task in chess. It's very unpleasant to be on the side that should defend the position. So rook d3 was possible, but after knight takes c4, queen e1, we have a very interesting position here. Black can play c takes d4, and now this knight's coming into play. So knight takes d4, knight c5, rook d1, and here he could continue very calm move, rook b8. Just preparing for the attack, because now if bishop takes c4, b takes c4, the rook is also active, and now black has ideas like knight a4, for example. There are some really beautiful variations here in the analysis of this game. For example, in case of knight c6, rook b7, and knight a4, in trying to exchange some pieces. Now black plays knight takes b2. They start off a very beautiful combination. Because in case of knight takes b7, knight takes d1, queen takes, bishop d7, bishop takes b7, there are still 2 pieces for the queen, but the thing is that after knight a4, the knight's coming to c3, rook c8, and the attack continues, the attack goes on stronger than ever. And in case of rook d2, rook c7, rook takes b2, knight a4. Black keeps sacrificing material. It's amazing because he's already a queen down, but his position only improves. So rook c2, rook takes, king takes, bishop e6. Look at this position. Black has the 1 piece for the queen, and still he's the side pressing. For example, knight b3, rook c8, king d3, rook c3. And if king e2, then rook c2, king e3, rook takes a2. And at this point, white has nothing better than knight c1. But now comes bishop c3. And the queen is almost running out of moves. For example, queen d1, knight b2, queen e2, knight c4. The queen is lost here. So queen takes, and bishop d2, king e2, rook c2, regaining the material. Bishop b3, rook c1, and the endgame is lost, despite being opposite colored bishops endgame. I mean, I'm jumping some analysis because there are too many variations, but showing you the most beautiful lines. And after bishop e2, there is knight a4. So yeah, this is again another nice position. If b3, knight a3 check, king c1, and simply bishop d7, preparing to bring the other rook Then another rook. Rook f8, king d2, bishop takes d4. Look at this king, very bad. Rook c1, knight c4, bishop takes, b takes, but white still cannot hold the attack here against rook b2, c3, for example. Moves like that, like this. Rook b1, c3, king d3, e5, takes, king d1, rook b2, and yeah, the pressure is still increasing here. But okay, this doesn't happen in the game, but it's to show how complex the position becomes after this queen sacrifice. It's very difficult for white to calculate all the variations and to see all the ideas coming. Meanwhile, for black, it's just a matter of keeping activating his pieces and bringing all of them to the attack. So rook c1, knight takes c4, and here rook takes c4. White tried to relieve the pressure by giving back some material, but because it was also very difficult to play keeping this material, like queen c3, knight db6, queen d3, and now d5. Now trying to activate this bishop on c8, and if b3, black has the very strong reply c takes d4, b takes c4, b takes c4, queen d2, d3, knight c3, rook b8, for example, and white is defenseless against knight a4. Well, there are too many amazing variations here, but it won't be possible to show all of them. So the game went rook takes c4, b takes c4, and here knight c1. I think this move makes a lot of sense. He wants to regain the pawn and bring the knight to b3 to defend the king somehow. But as strange as it may look, this is the decisive mistake. It was better knight f4 because white could play bishop takes c4 in the same way, but he would be able to play knight d3 or knight d5 in some positions, and it's a better defensive try. On the other hand, of knight c1, rook b8, bishop takes c4, knight b6, Tau keeps activating his pieces. The game went bishop b3, bishop takes d4, and queen d2. But we can see at this point that black has now rook and piece for the queen, by the queen, and this is simply very, very good already for black because the attack continues. He plays bishop g7, and now it's simply a matter of time because black is threatening to play c4 and c3. White is simply hopeless against this threat, and there's nothing white can do to avoid the opening of the b file. So he plays knight e2, but after c3, bishop c2, c4, bishop c2, c3. He cannot play knight takes c3 because of knight c4. So queen d3 and c takes b2. Well, the b file is still closed, but now we have a very powerful pawn, passed pawn on the 7th rank. It's obvious that this is already hopeless for white. So knight d4, bishop d7, rook d1, rook fc8, bishop b3, and now Tau played knight a4. Very practical decision. A5 was also possible, preparing a4. This would be enough. A5 is pretty good. But knight a4 was also very, very good. Bishop takes. And I mean, the main threat here is bishop takes d4 and bishop c2 mate. So the game continue with knight b3, but now it's very simple. Rook c3, queen takes a6, bishop b3, a takes, and rook b2 c8. The pawn is untouchable because of rook c6. So queen a3, but rook c1 takes, and white resigned. There are too many mates here. Rook a1, or promoting. My favorite mate here is b1 bishop, which is also mate. So yeah, it's a very nice game. It's a pity that I couldn't show all the variations because there are so many amazing variations. So I would recommend to people who want to improve their attacking abilities and the calculation to analyze this game, trying to find other ideas for both sides in many moments, and especially analyze Mihail Tau's games, because I am not myself a player of sacrificing material, and I don't consider myself a good attacking player. So I always try to learn from games from strong attacking players like Tau and other famous players, how to handle these kind of dynamic positions when you have to part with material to get active piece play, to get an attack against the opponent king, how to find the tactical ideas, how to look for for resources, and it's something very important to develop in our game as well. So I hope you have enjoyed this analysis. I like very much this game, as I said, and thanks for watching. See you in the next video.